Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And I have to tell you, I'm super excited. Well, there's a lot of things going on, but I'm really super excited for this upcoming show. I have Robert Powell and David Falch, who is a FLIR expert. And we're going to be talking all kinds of things here. But before that, I wanted to let people know that there was kind of interesting things happening in Washington, D.C. I'm going to share this right now, and just bear with me because people that know me well know that I'm not always really good with tech. So let's see if I can get this going here. And
talk a little bit more about the role of Democrats in this.
Yeah, so again, this is a bipartisan commission. Remember, JFK was a Democrat, RFK was a Democrat, and I'm sure that I think the entire conference had a question on what actually happened with Dr. Martin Luther King, but also UAPs. You guys know that that was the biggest bipartisan bicameral hearing that we've ever had, I think, in congressional history. I do not know who their members are yet. They've noticed it, but they're taking this very seriously. This is not a conspiracy theory investigating committee. We're actually looking to present truth to the American people. And it's in my opinion that no one person elected to office is more important or more qualified to look at the information that they've been hiding from us. And so we look to push for that transparency.
What sort of witnesses will you expect to have?
well, since I mentioned I'm such a tech foe, down below, Robert, can you wave? Did you hear the audio in that? You did hear it. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure before I went on to the next part of it, which I think again is very interesting here. And here it goes.
What are you hoping to uncover as far as UAP that you have not already heard from other UAP?
The biggest information problems that we've had with UAPs is the amount of stonewalling, stovepiping, and also it seems that there is this push to gaslight the American people into looking at the evidence and then not fully believing it. I think for us, if we're writing the budget, for example, into the Pentagon, if we're writing the budget overall for whatever programs might be out there, why is it that members of Congress who are given a top secret security clearance are being denied access? That's not a free and true government. And so for us, especially being that we have now a Secretary of State who's actually open to declassification and Marco Rubio, we're hoping to present that information and at least acknowledge it from a government perspective that we are not alone, but also let's see what the evidence is.
So that's, I just wanted to present that because I thought this is good information for those of you who have not seen it yet. So we're in exciting times, and these are going to be, public hearings. And you know what I usually do when I hear there's a public hearing? Myself and my producer, Donna, and I try to figure out a way to get there. And so it may be as soon as March. But with no further ado, I'd like to well, first of all, I got to just say, I always forget to do, not always, but sometimes I do forget this. But just so everyone knows, next week, I'm really excited to have Sarah Gam on. She was a former employee of the UAP task force. She's going to be on next week. And so our blog this week by Charles Lear is called a 1972 UFO creature report from Anderson, California. That's Shasta, Mount Shasta, which is such an intriguing place. I always love, I've been there many times. I love exploring there. It's kind of like an eerie area. I really, I think there's a lot happening in that area for some reason. Without further ado, Robert Powell, welcome.
Hi, Martin. It's good to see you again.
Yes, I'm very excited, as I said. And Dave Falch, welcome.
Hello, good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, so very excited for tonight's show in a lot of ways. Two great people on, first of all, but also I think it was very interesting when we had our conversation about the debunking of. Let's just start right out with the Aguadilla UFO, and And Dave, you have such a background. If you would, a lot of people have seen Robert on this show a number of times, but if you would, can you give us your background?
I guess the applicable background would be I was in the Navy. I did 4.5 years as an aviation electronics technician. I worked on SLAM ER pods, ComNav, a lot of avionics. Then when I got out, I found a job working as depot level FLIR technician So I'm a contractor. I don't really say who I work for security reasons, but I've been doing that for about the last 19 years, and that's where I stand today.
Now, how long has the FLIR technology been available?
Well, I would say since about mid 90s is when it really erupted.
Had no idea it was that
It's been
long.
available since I think the 70s, but it really started to get more mainstream in the 90s.
Okay, and when we were talking the other evening, is this the actual camera that has been used a lot, or in some of these cases?
Yeah, that looks like an MX-15, and that would
That's
be
what
the
it is.
standard. Yes.
Yep.
That would be the standard mid-wave infrared camera that they would use. It's an airborne, so
Okay, and this would be used on things like helicopters and planes, jets.
correct. Yes.
Yep. Yep. And would this be used in the one so-called gimbal? Do you know if this was the same thing used in what was called the gimbal UFO?
No, the gimbal was an AT FLIR, advanced targeting FLIR. So that's mounted to like an F-18 or FA-18. And it sits underneath the wing and it rotates differently. It's kind of like that system, but it's tilted this way and its movement's different, but
I see.
similar technology.
Okay. And we're going to be talking about all of that stuff and what people like Mick West has come to his so-called conclusions and all that. But Robert, just for someone who has not seen you on the show previously, a little bit of background about you, please.
Okay, sure. My degree is in chemistry, and I worked in the semiconductor field for about 27 years. And I've been studying the UAP subject for about 17 years. And I was one of the founders of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, sometimes referred to as SCU. And I actually met Dave about, I think it was back in the year 2014 or 15, based on working on the Aguadilla case.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I don't know where we want to start with this. You both saw the Nova special, and of course, I had the writer and producer of that special on this show a while back, and so I wasn't too hard on her. Probably, I probably should have been a little tougher on her, but because I had her on before the special came out. And nobody actually saw this. But I got to tell you, since that special came out, I probably have 20 emails from people saying, "Oh, I can't believe it." Some people saying, "Oh, it was really good," but most people are saying, "What is this?" With Mick West with a fishing pole in a swimming pool, and all this type of thing. But anyway, it's been interesting. But so I wanted to know, where would you like to start in this whole thing, Robert? I'm going to start with you. As far as the debunking of, now, I didn't have a chance. I do not have, and I don't know if I was, without a copyright issue, if I could have even displayed. But why don't we give a kind of a nutshell of what was attempted to debunk this thing with the plastic fork and spoon?
Yeah, sure. So, but let me start off, Martin, by just saying, when I grew up as a kid, I always thought very highly of PBS and Nova. That's where it was like, if I wanted to see a good science show, that's where I went. And so I was very disappointed when I saw this particular show. I mean, there are a lot of science errors in this show. And so to give the audience a little bit of a background on what they're showing, this is related to the Aguadilla video. And so they have two individuals on the show who give a theory that the Aguadilla video is actually an IR image of two birds. And, and in science, you can have a hypothesis like that, right? If you say, let's see if it's two birds. Well, what you should do, of course, is you say, okay, the video was 2 minutes and I only see this one object. Does it make sense that an IR system that the government runs could not separate two birds for a full 2 minutes of a video, right? And then you would also do things such as, is the line of sight, does that match up two birds, right? But in this particular show, what they did is they just concentrated on why the objects disappear into the ocean. So basically, the theory was shrunken to, did two birds disappear into the ocean, right? And so I want to jump to the hilarious part of it right off the bat, right? So they take out these plastic forks and a couple of wood blocks and put them on a wood table and show how they're, like, if I take out my little cell phone, right, they've got a cheap IR system that they add on to their cell phone, right? And now and this is the science they're trying to do. They're comparing this to $250,000 government system, right? That uses cryogenically temperature reduced detectors on the system. And I think you showed it. I don't know, you may have showed a picture of it just a moment earlier, but you're talking about $250,000 system versus this $100 system. So, so they're photographing these forks. They take a couple of them and put them in a cooler and then put them back on the table. And they wait several minutes, right, to get the temperatures to match so that they disappear from the IR camera. So what they're trying to say is, see these birds, their background temperature matched the ocean and they disappeared. Well, I think you've got a photograph of, I don't know if you have it handy, Martin, of a bird taken in IR.
I have the Canada geese. Let me just show that, because you obviously see wings flapping. I mean, here we go.
Right. Yeah. You obviously see wings flapping. And the other thing is, it's very easy to separate them.
Right.
But the craziest thing that I couldn't believe these two guys said was that if you let it, their theory was, if the birds stay there long enough, they'll take on the same temperature as the ocean, and so they disappear.
Right.
Well, if they took on the same temperature of the ocean, they would disappear, right? But the last time I checked, a live bird has its own internal heating source, just like you and I do. So they're not going to disappear, right? I mean, unless there's something like the predator where that they can just mimic their background. There's no way a live bird is going to disappear by mimicking the temperature of the ocean behind it. So I was just floored.
You know, it would have been good. It would have been better is if they could have had someone like you on after, and you know how they do that in some of these documentaries. Well, they'll have someone will show their point and then someone will show their other point, you know, based on what the person before them did. That would have been so great if they had someone like you or Dave on. And Dave, let's just hear your basic take on that. I know you looked at it as well.
Well, you know, there's the scientific method in which you want to try to duplicate the circumstance at hand. So if I were in charge, I would fly another thing in, you know, fly the FLIR and try Mylar balloons and Chinese lanterns and look at birds and discount the things that are just pretty much typically there that people use as a prosaic explanation. But they used a little handheld long wave thermal camera and they were satisfied with that. So I agree with Robert's assessment that I thought this was like a prestigious scientific institute, and it was just the most hokey thing I've ever seen. Because I do that a lot when people say, well, it's probably a bird or an airplane. I say, no, it's not that, because I'm using the same equipment. I'm looking out back and here's the bird and the airplane. This is what they look like. So I make videos like that and I put them on YouTube. That's more scientific-y than what they had with the little handheld FLIR.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see, just a couple of other things. That's basically another real clip, you know, short clip of, you know, birds. Basically, to me, the thing,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
And I was
But I
gonna
just
say,
can't see that
Martin,
they'd separate.
you could see how distinctive that bird was sitting
Yeah.
on that piece of wood, right? Until
Yeah.
that bird dies and falls over,
Yeah.
he's never taking on the temperature of that piece of wood.
Now I can understand where they could say, "Hey, look, the wings don't have as much of a temperature because they're outstretched, and they're." But still, the bodies have the warmth that this is picking up. Plus, for them to stay together perfectly matched for what is it, over 2 minutes?
Yeah, for over 2 minutes. And the other thing that happens is, if you remember when these guys do their fork experiment, they say
Yeah.
it takes several minutes for their fork to match up with the table, right? Well, this object changed its temperature because it disappeared in less than 1 second. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to say that it matched the background temperature.
Now this is my opinion only, but what I think is sad about this is there's going to be a few people watching this and millions of people watching Nova. And of course, like Dave said, a highly respected science show. It's kind of disappointing that wasn't challenged in any type of way.
Well,
Agreed.
that is true what you're saying, Martin. But what is also true is the SCU put out a 159-page report on this that will always exist. And what these guys said on a Nova show, if someone in the future decides to investigate this or look back at it, that's not what they're going to look at. They're going to look at the report that we wrote on it.
I hope so. And, you basically just came up with what we always say. It's an unknown.
Exactly. And now that's the crazy thing, Martin. If you watch the show, right? So they try to give you a ridiculous possibility, which is 2 birds. And in order to justify it, they give you a more ridiculous possibility, which they claim, well, people think this is an alien spaceship that's warping through our atmosphere, right? So if that's what I have to choose from, well, yeah, I'm probably going to choose the 2 birds, even though that's a pretty ridiculous, theory. But that's not the way this should be done, right? You should be looking at all the possibilities and not throwing out, it's not a Klingon cruiser, so it must be 2 birds.
Right. I think I'm going to play a clip, for people that are just, wondering what we're talking about when we're talking about the Aguadilla UFO. And if they haven't seen it before, I'd like to play that right now here. And I don't think that there's any audio to it, but we'll see.
No,
here.
there's no audio.
Okay. So right here it goes. This is like a 3-minute clip, but I'm just going to play it in its entirety. And Robert, you're welcome, or Dave, either one of you, if you want to say anything.
Yeah. So in this, your dark color is the warmer material, and the light color is colder, and that's the object that this Homeland Security plane was videoing. And so it's flying in over terrain. Those are trees. Those are cows. All those little black dots you just saw. So it's flying along, and in a minute you'll see it will begin to fly back over the. There's a little pond. And you'll see it fly back over the airport runway here shortly.
And I just want to say, while we're taking this little break here, I want to thank everyone that's watching. Thank you all in chat. I see there's a lot of people in there, and thanks for being here. And I'm not going to be able to interact too much with chat because we have a number of videos. So this is a runway, right?
Right. It's going back over the runway, and now it's headed towards the. This is a grocery store that it's passing right there, and there's a street. You can see the cars that were moving up and down the street. And at this point in time, the land actually drops very rapidly towards the ocean. It's a 200-foot drop.
Now, what was the wind direction? Any? Do you know anything about
Wind
that?
was moving from the east to the west at about 13 to 14 miles per hour. Now, you might pause it right there.
All right.
Oh, that's a good pause. Okay, so for the audience, these IR systems are so good that they can detect a 1/10 of a degree centigrade difference. So what you're
Wow.
seeing here is that's the ocean, and those dark lines are waves. And these cameras are so good, they can detect the temperature difference between the top of the crest of a wave and the trough of the wave. And that's why you're able to see the waves. And that's why they're not as dark as the unknown object there, right? Because their temperatures are closer. And the object is extremely dark here because it is the darkest, by the darkest, it is the warmest object in that video frame. And that's why it's the blackest.
I see. Wow. Okay. And we're coming up to pretty soon. It's going to split, if I remember right.
It'll go into the water first, I believe.
Oh, that's
You'll see it in
correct.
a
Yeah,
sec.
that's right.
Okay, pause there.
All right.
And your audience may be able to see that. Okay, let me back up for a minute. Water blocks IR very well. So you can't see an object once it goes underwater.
Because of the temperature, it just evens out.
Well, no, just water blocks infrared radiation. So
I see.
it can't penetrate the water.
Yep.
So, but it's just, well, in a moment when you start it back up, if people look very carefully, they see what looks like a shadow of the object moving through the water.
All right. I just want to ask you this quickly. When you said the wind direction, was this thing traveling in a different direction?
Yes, this object at this point in time is actually now traveling from the south to the north.
And the wind again was traveling what?
From the east to the west.
Okay, so that kind of rules out the Mylar balloon, that's for sure.
Well, there's a lot of reasons that rule out the Mylar balloon, that being one of them, because the direction change is towards the end of the video. But see the object, you can kind of see that little white looking as it was under the water. You're not actually seeing the object. You're seeing a temperature difference in the water as the object is pushing through the water. So you're not really seeing the object at that point. Now here, you'll see it touch the water right before it splits. And see, right then, you could tell that it touched the water because the color, the darkness of the water changed as it impacted the water.
Just going to play that again.
Right there, you can see right where it touched. And this is where it is split, and we have two objects that are the same size. Now, when we first analyzed this video, my first thought was a second object came out of the water, right? So that we had two objects. But as we broke this video down frame by frame, and what we actually saw, I mean, we don't have an explanation for this, but what we actually saw was the object slowly increase in size, right? And the hot spot, it has a hot spot in it, you know, the hotter part in the very center of the object. That hot spot began to increase in size. And then the object, it was like mitosis in biology. The object just slowly split apart into two, you know, and we have no explanation for how that could be or what happened. That's just, you know, all we can do is say this is the results.
And Dave, when did you first look at this particular?
Well, like Robert said, we checked it out, or I kind of jumped onto their conclusion around 2014. And just a quick update. It's those systems are like worth millions now. Just maybe it's the economy, but
Oh my God! Yeah,
$250,000. Those days are long gone. But
yeah, it's like the $60,000 screwdriver. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God. Even the cables cost thousands of dollars. But getting back to your original point, I took a look at it and I showed some co-workers, some senior co-workers in my shop, so they could get a different pair of eyes on it, just so there's no like confirmation bias or anything from my point of view. Because I kind of like alien stuff, you know. You could see from the guitar in the back, I got alien strap. But I had a senior level guy come over and he said, "Yeah, that it's not a balloon, because we know Mylar balloons. They're like floating mirrors, as I call them. They It looks like it's changing temperature, kind of, and I didn't want to rule that out. But the further I looked at it, especially when it breaks into two different things, it's like there's no way that's Mylar balloons, especially maintaining the same speed, because Mylar balloons are erratic in the wind. They just kind of float, free floating. But these two objects were like on a linear path, it almost seemed, and they were kind of almost synced together. It was very anomalous. So I was very interested when the SCU started looking at this real hard. And that's when I decided I was going to throw my 2 cents in there.
Now, did Andy Marcel have anything to do with this video being released?
No.
You know who he is? No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did this video get out there?
I believe it was leaked from DHS, from the Aguadilla site, that they took it. They took a video of it on the flights, like they do. They're trying to find some drug runners, or illegals or whatever, and they always record the videos so they can use them in court cases and whatnot. And somebody took an interest in it and took it to somebody else, and it just kind of trickled its way out into mainstream. That'd be my assessment. What do you think,
We
Rob?
actually got an original copy from one of the guys, the friend of the guy who was piloting the airplane.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, but nonetheless, we still wanted to establish that it was a real video and that these guys hadn't, faked it or, something like that. So we were able to do that because we asked for radar data. Right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So we tracked the plane on radar. So we know where the plane was at every moment. And then the plane, the metadata that's on the screen of the plane tells you the plane's latitude, longitude, coordinates. And so those matched perfect, right? So we know it's a real video. And the other thing we did when we got this video was we talked to one of the guys actually took a tour of their base. And so they gave us a tour of the base, which was nice. A tour of the plane that, took the video. These guys basically had taken off, and the tower had seen this light approaching from the northwest coming towards the airport. So that he asked them to circle back around to pick this up. And so they circled after they took off one more time. And then that's when they saw it with their eyes.
See, that's the thing that is never talked about, is that there was a light scene first. I mean, you didn't hear them say that on the Nova special, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. That's they put some lights on those two birds, and and off they went. So what happened was they put the IR on the object, their IR camera, and then at that point the lights went out, but they were still able to track it because they're tracking the heat signature, even though the lights turned off.
Do you know if the object showed up on radar?
There's we go into this in our report. There is an object to the northwest, right? And that's when they said they saw an object coming. The object we see on radar to the northwest is moving, but it's on radar, it's moving very erratically. And it has no transponder. So we know it's not an airplane or anything, like that. But it doesn't correlate exactly with the object that was on the video, because we see it on radar about 4 minutes before all of this happens, but it's in the same direction. And what we looked at is we looked at where the radar was at, the distance to the airport. And so according to what we came up with, once an object would have dropped below about 800 feet, it would have disappeared from radar. So if this was the same object, and if it had dropped below 800, we wouldn't see it anymore on radar.
Oh, I see. Now, what is the argument against the parallax? What's it called? The parallax effect.
Well, I mean, of course, the parallax effect that's a true effect, that it's basically like when you're in your car and you're moving and you look out the windows and it looks like the trees are moving in the opposite direction, right? That's a parallax effect. So for us, that was never an issue because we looked at points in the video where we knew where the object was. So see, if you know where the object is, there's no parallax issue anymore because you know its exact location. Parallax becomes a problem when you don't truly know the location of the object. So there were 3 times we knew the exact location of the object. One, when it moved behind a telephone pole. A second time when it goes behind a tree and disappears. And the third time is when it impacts the ocean. Because when it impacts the ocean, you know exactly where it's at.
Oh, I see. Yep.
And the further support that it actually impacted the ocean was that we tracked the speed of the object from when it impacts the ocean to when it comes out of the ocean.
I see.
And we were able to detect a slight drop in speed from when it impacts as it first starts to move through the water. So it impacts at around 110 miles per hour, and there's very little water movement. But we detect a slight drop of speed down to around 80 to 85 miles per hour.
Which is kind of hilarious to think of, if something hit water at that speed, it would break to pieces normally.
Right. Yeah. Normally you would just have a huge, amount of water going everywhere, and the object would, although we do have, and we checked into this, what type of drones do we have and what can they do? And we do have some drones. There was one, I think Boeing makes it, but it's basically it's more like a torpedo with small wings. And when it impacts the water, it blows its wings off and then begins to move just as a torpedo through the water.
So it can't come back up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It can't come back up though, but it can impact the water with minimal, without damaging itself and, being blown apart when it hits.
Right. Now here's where it gets kind of weird. And that is, the transmedium situation. And also the fact that, people have witnessed for years and years and years, decades, I should say, of these things taking off at really high rates of speed, no sonic boom, hits the water, goes in and out of the water. Okay, it's slowed down a little bit, but we don't see a splash. You would see a splash. It just doesn't seem to make any sense, but these are the things that we're witnessing, and that video kind of shows it firsthand right there.
Yeah. And if someone, is interested in reading the full report that we wrote on it, they can go to explorescu.org and the report is there. But one thing we did look at is we looked frame by frame as that object entered the water, and we could detect a very slight disturbance of the water. So, but it was very minimal, right? But there is a very minimal disturbance of the water as the object moves in.
All right, just to let the listener know, I am going to put that link in where that paper is. I'm trying to find it now in the show notes. So, and also, down below on YouTube. So, would be, people can read that freely if they'd like to. So, I won't be able to do it right now, of course, during the show, but I will do that. And so, that's not like what would be considered a white paper in any type of way, is it?
It's more of a monograph. it's it's 159 pages, so it's more than just a white paper.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But I mean, is it something that, yeah, I mean, this is more or less scientific. I mean, is this something that can, I don't even know if something like this can be reviewed because it's, I mean, peer reviewed because it's something that is not, something you can't reproduce.
Well, it's for an academic paper, it's too large,
I
right?
see. Yeah.
You could write some academic papers based on this paper, which is kind of like what happened with our Nimitz paper. That one was like 260 pages. And so, like, for example, Kevin Knuth and Peter Reale and we put together an academic paper, which is only like 20 pages, but it looks specifically, for example, at acceleration. So it's an academic paper on acceleration.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah. The what the purported G-force would be, and what was that G-force, and that's when it's going down to the ocean.
Oh, well, when it goes into the ocean like that, it's close to in the range of the high hundreds of G-forces.
Which
yeah,
I mean, do we even have a craft that would take that type of G-force?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I mean, we fire artillery shells that, they may take like 50 G-forces, and then we have let's see, it's a magnetic rail gun, and this little 2-pound blob of metal that they fire out of it, may hit 100 G-forces, but it's not a craft. It's a chunk of metal that you fire, and it can't change directions. I mean, it's just a straight shot.
Wow. So I'd like to, I'm going to play a couple of videos. We have a lot of videos this time, but I'm not sure if this one in particular, I think you can narrate it if you would, Dave. This has to do with the 2 Mylar balloons that you actually went up in a helicopter. And so we're going to play that right now. And just for those who are listening to this in audio, I kind of, in this particular case, I kind of suggest that you may want to go over to the YouTube link, and which I'll also put in the show notes of the audio if you want to see the visual part of this.
Yeah, it just seems like the most likely explanation would be 2 Mylar balloons that got separated once they hit the water or something like that. So I wanted to show the difference in the contrast of the balloons, see how there's the black on top and the white on bottom. So the white is hot, the black is cold. And you see the things tumbling and you see the erratic nature of them floating around in the sky. So that's my main objective here, is to say, no, the Aguadilla object is not 2 balloons. This is a similar distance. It's like in a narrow field of view. So it's just, like I said, going back to the scientific method, trying to reproduce the image and to see how like a juxtaposition, the differences of what it really is.
Now, does it matter what time of day and what type of heat there is?
Somewhat, but again, the Earth is going to be hot and the sky is going to be cold. So when you're looking at a Mylar balloon, not so much. It's going to show up as a Mylar balloon, and pilots are able to identify these balloons pretty easily.
Now, Dave, I'm not sure if you're aware, did you happen to see when they held the first, the UAP hearing, it was actually not an open one, but they showed like this object go by, this pilot, he took it on his cell phone, I do believe. And I do believe that was a Mylar balloon. Did you ever get a chance to look at that?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, yeah. But I mean, Mylar balloons are things that they unfortunately have to deal with. They're out there.
Yeah, oh yeah, they're out there because you're walking out of the grocery store with your kids' birthday balloons, and you drop something, you go to pick it up, and you forget the balloons are in your hand, and they fly out in the sky. There's nothing you can do.
Right. And here's now I don't know. Did you want me to show any of the other ones like above, or I'll just tell you what I have here. I can show the jets in infrared, but that I wanted to get into that a little bit later when it came to the gimbal, or we can talk a little bit more about
the Mylar up from above is relevant because most of my videos I'm showing
gonna have to unmute yourself, Dave.
Okay, am I back?
Yep.
Okay, so these are just balloons that I've tethered to my roof. And in anticipation of getting this type of video footage, and you can see how they look just from an above view. And that's all I was trying to achieve here, is that they're not going to look exactly like the Aguadilla object. And I think it's pretty obvious. They're both mid-wave infrared systems. This is a FLIR system opposed to a Westcam, but they both essentially do the same thing, in
Mhm.
regards to this type of footage.
Now, when we talked right after the Nova special came out, you were saying that there was some type of long range wave. I don't know if it was wave or a range or whatever it was, but for instance, the little thing that you could put on a cell phone was totally different. And what does that mean? The detection of the waves, or how does that? I'm a neophyte here.
Hang on a second. I'll get one.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. The long range like that is 8 to 14 microns is the wavelength.
Oh, long range. That's what it is.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then the what the military uses in like the Aguadilla, that's a 3 to 5 micron window
Right. So
it's looking at.
this is your long wave infrared. So you'll have the IR over here on the side and the EO, or the electro optics or daylight camera, over here on this side. And you plug it into your phone and it's going to give you just one field of view. There's no magnification and it's not cryogenically cooled. You can buy these for like $300. You just plug them in your phone and they're good for, electricians to see, what's hot on an electrical box, and they're functional, but they're not the same. It's apples and oranges. It's grapes and dragon fruit. It's just two totally different beasts going on there.
Right. And one of the, getting back to the Nimitz and that whole situation, when that was the Tic Tac, video that we often see. I don't have that I could just pull up right now. But anyway, there's been arguments of what that is and isn't, but when it shoots off, this is just for your professional opinion. When that thing shoots off, is that like going like a super fast speed that it can't even, the tracking instruments can't even track?
Yep. What we calculated was it would be a minimum of 40 G-forces, the rate at which it moved.
Wow.
So, and I want to just make a note. It's very difficult for one of those systems to lose lock.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because these systems are used during a war when a jet is after, he's locked onto another jet, and that jet is making very fast maneuvers, as is the jet with the FLIR system. So you can't afford for that system to lose lock. And in this case, the jet is not violently moving at all. It is just slowly moving down, towards this object when the object suddenly moves to the left and breaks lock.
Wow. And you feel the same way on that, Dave?
Well, I concur via an associate of mine, Chris Lito, who is a pilot. And, I worked with him on a few videos, but I was telling him, not to segue, but the gimbal video, when I saw the object rotate in the gimbal, that was one of the most fascinating things I've seen from my point of view. And he said, well, the Tic Tac, was it the Tic Tac? The one that zooms off the side?
Yeah, that's the Tic Tac. Yeah.
Okay, he said that was the one that made him gasp. So I would give him the benefit of the doubt from his expertise in being a Air Force pilot that I'm gonna believe him.
Yeah, I gotta tell you a funny story about Chris. So he and I are good friends, but I watched him, I don't know, was it 3 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, and he was basically someone sent me, a lot of people, I have a lot of great listeners, thank you all that do this. Sometimes I'm inundated, and I got to thank a special thank to Palmer, who sends me all kinds of things all the time. But so I was sent this, like, you got to check this guy out. He's a, former F-18 pilot, and he's, talking about debunking the debunkers and, Mick West. And so I watched it and I thought, wow, and I liked his sense of humor or whatever. I reached out to him and I said, hey, Chris, I do a show on UFOs. Would you like to be on? And he's like, let me think about it. And, this was in the very beginning of him exploring that stuff. And then, he said, okay. And then he told me since then, he almost backed out like several times. He was going to back out because he just go the UFO route. And now he's all into it.
Oh, he's
And
all in.
he's doing a really good job too. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What makes the Tic Tac incident, so important is that it's not just one thing that happens that day, right?
Yeah.
Because it's detected on radar on the USS Princeton, and they give those F-18s the coordinates of the object that they're looking at on radar. So the F-18s go 50, 60 miles out west to where the Princeton said this object is at.
Yeah.
And they visually confirm what the radar saw, right? So you've got radar that detects the object, and then you have 4 pilots who arrive at the point where the radar says this object is, and there the object is. So it's a really strong case. It's probably one of the best cases in history, I think.
Oh, I agree. And, I was there when Dave Fravor testified, and, and Ryan Graves was there as well, David Grush at that time. But I was there, and it just, David Fravor's testimony is just solid as a rock. And for people to say he's crazy or he doesn't, that's ridiculous to say that for someone who would be handling that type of equipment and, and as sharp as he is, and that he's, hallucinating? Is that what you're going to say? It's crazy.
Well, that's what they do that on the Nova show, right? They do the thing on the ladder and look at the swimming.
Oh yeah,
pool
let's talk about
room.
that. The ladder, the fishing pole, and the ladder.
Oh yeah,
oh my
that
God.
was hilarious.
Okay.
Here's the crazy thing about it, right? Because he says, "See how I can take my camera and I can jerk it around, and that causes parallax." Which it does, and it makes the Tic Tac look like it's jumping around like a ping pong ball, right? Because that's the way Fravor described it, is this object that was just moved like this, right?
Right.
Well, the problem with this whole setup, for starters, is there was no camera involved. This was the 4 pilots looking down at the object, right?
Absolutely.
So the only way parallax occurs is if the pilots were either jerking their heads around and were confused, or they were jerking their plane around in ways that can't be done, causing a parallax appearance of the Tic Tac jerking around. So that was one of the the more humorous of the things that Nova put up. I'm just really surprised no one at Nova caught these gross errors.
Yeah, I never even thought about that when I was watching it. There was a visual, what they saw, the ping pong effect or whatever, that was all visual.
Yeah. And he's taking a camera and jerking his camera around, showing how it looks like the Tic Tac's moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't even think of that. That's so true though. That's hilarious when you think about it. But, getting back to one of the things that, Mick West said about, I want to ask you this in particular, Dave. So Mick West said that the rotation of the object and the gimbal, and I know that, here's the thing, they say it was like a plane far away, but they say, look on the SA or whatever it is, there's a bunch of them. They never talk about that part of it. So they just focus on that one image of the gimbal, turning like it does. And was that actually the rotation of the FLIR itself, the camera itself?
No, because it rotates against the cloud horizon, and I have been arguing with Mick for I don't know how many years about that particular fact.
Yeah.
I am on LinkedIn and I get on and I connect with people, and one of them happened to be an UAP FLIR engineer at one point in his life. And I asked him, I said, could this have something to do with the optics? Because infrared optics are different than daylight optics. They consist of germanium or silicone or these different type of materials that don't allow light in, so there's no glare as far as a light source. And then he would get into semantics of, well, it's still magnetic radiation, and you're kind of nitpicking things, and I'm like, that's not what I see, because when you're looking at the gimbal, you're in a narrow field of view, as it shows on the symbology, and that type of glare doesn't exist at that field of view. Right. So you're looking at that there, and look how distinguished it is. And they're
There's a whole
saying,
fleet of them. Look on the SA.
and I don't know what the SA is. That's their avionics.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
And you got this weird eerie glow around it that you don't see from typical jet exhaust plumes. You get more of spiking.
That's not our LNS, though, is it? It's
Hmm.
not. It is our LNS, dude. Well,
And you'll see it rotate against the clouds there.
I can see that.
So you
It's
would
pretty
see the whole
pretty obvious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a thing in the at FLIR optics called a derotation device, which he's kind of trying to confuse people and saying, oh, the derotation device is rotating, but it's making the glare rotate, but it doesn't rotate the cloud horizon. And I said, that's impossible, because those are highly polished mirrors. And I've made videos on this, and he just never addresses them. That it would rotate the whole scene. The whole scene would rotate in the rotation. But he comes up with all these little things, like little specks in the IR video, and it's just he's grasping. He just doesn't. He doesn't get. He's not a FLIR technician. He just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Okay, wow. I just saw this. We only have about 4 minutes on KGRA, but we're going to continue on for those of you on YouTube that are watching us live. But yeah, I mean, there's some people that have said to me, do you know that Nick West is part of a nonprofit of, skeptics? I forget exactly the association, but they have like $4 million in their budget or something, or whatever it is, in their funding. And it's whatever it is. I mean, I'm just saying this, and I'm not saying based on any facts. I'm just saying there's someone that I know pretty well. He's a scientist and he's looked into it, and I can't remember the association. And if he happens to be, he goes by the nickname of Bo. If you happen to be listening live right now, if you wouldn't mind typing that into the chat, I'd appreciate that. But
Yeah. Here, Mick, I'm thinking Mick now, Martin. The real problem with what Mick does is he never puts it down in paper, right? He doesn't publish something that can stand the test of time, that someone else can go read and say, okay, what's his argument? How does he do this, right?
Yep.
It's just like when he creates a video demonstration of something, right? Because he was a game guy. That doesn't mean anything until you show how that video was created and what are the parameters that went into the algorithm. Because otherwise, all you have is a video that someone created, which to me is pretty meaningless. But I've asked him before, I said, why don't you publish, a report on the gimbal, or publish a report on the Nimitz incident, right? And he never wants to do it. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time trying to argue with him. Because
I don't see why he has any credence whatsoever. It's just he has a debunking thing, and so he's built himself this network of people that believe in some of the things he's done, because he's not stupid, but he just doesn't know the information in this category. So he kind of latches on these sycophants, and then all of a sudden they're going to believe everything he says. So
Well, I got to tell you, I have to give him credit where credit is due. And there has been a couple of things that I have seen that he actually did crack. And one of them, I don't know if you recall this, was the Chilean government had this UFO supposedly that did end up being, a jetliner from everything was actually nailed right down. He did.
Oh.
No, you're saying no on that one?
No.
Are you disagreeing? Okay, let's hear
Oh,
your
totally.
let's hear your argument. I'd like to hear it.
Well,
Yeah.
his flawed theory is it does look like a jet, and I would agree with that. But he says the jet's like somewhere between 60 to 90 miles away, and I said
50
"Nick,
miles, I thought he said. Yeah, but anyway.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
say 50. Anything over 30 miles away, I don't care how big the jet is, you're not going to see it with the infrared detector because it doesn't have the capabilities with the atmospheric conditions and whatnot. I've never, because I do laser rangefinder pings and I can get an accurate distance through triangulation about how far away this aircraft is, and I've never seen anything over 30 miles. It's just a faint little glimmer in the sky. And then his Chilean thing was huge. I was like, there's no possible way it could be that. I know he likes to match that up with radar and whatnot, but I'm saying put it down right now. It's not that. It's not an aircraft that he's saying it is.
So that actually had some credence because I thought they kind of surrendered to the idea that he was right on that one.
I did too, until I found out that he thought it was 50 miles away.
Yeah, I heard that. Wow. I'm asking Phil. I'm sorry, the person I know about the association that Mick West is the Skeptics Society or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, the problem with what Mick does, and he will admit this, he was like, okay, I'm just looking at the video. I'm not paying attention to anything else. I'm just looking at the video, right? But that's not the way, you should operate, right? You've got to take everything into account. You have to take into account that the radar detected an object, that the USS Princeton sends the jets to a point, XYZ coordinates in space, and there's the object, right? I mean, what are the odds that you see an object, that you've flown 50 miles to go intercept, and it's there just like the radar said? I mean, there's no way of hiding that other than doing what he does. I'm just looking at the video. I don't want to hear about anything else. We're just looking at the video.
Yeah. Speaking of that, one of the I brought this up a number of times in the show, and hopefully listeners won't get tired of hearing it, but I'm just going to throw it out to you that I watched a live stream event where Sean Kirkpatrick was the speaker, and he basically was asked questions by the journalists that were there, and someone in the front row said to him, are we going to hear, this had to do with AARO at the time, and they said, are we going to hear anything more about the Nimitz case? And he said, no, we're not going to be looking at that because you have all the information that we have. It's on YouTube. That's all you have to do is look on YouTube. And I thought that was so ridiculous for a number of facts. One of them, I don't know. I can't say 100% sure that this happened, but supposedly someone arrived on board and took the data bricks from the Hawkeye that was above and, had all the recordings of that and left with it. And then also, you can't tell me that video that we see that's for a few seconds is the only thing that we have, the only thing that was ever taken of that particular object.
Well, there's, I'm convinced, Martin, that someone did land a helicopter on the USS Princeton and removed the radar information. And I base that on two independent guys that I interviewed. And remember, I think it was on your show that I found Kevin Day.
Yeah, Kevin found us.
Right.
Yeah.
So I interviewed Kevin first, right? And this is before Kevin had been interacting with Gary Boris, right? Who was the other key crewman on the USS Princeton.
Yeah.
And so Kevin told me that the next morning after this event happened, he was a senior chief over radar. He goes to the bridge to get all the tapes, the communication tapes, as well as the radar, so he could write his report that morning. Everything's gone. And Kevin doesn't know why. He just tells me in his 17 years of history on the Navy, he's never seen that happen before, right? And that's all he can tell me. Okay, so now I go interview Gary Boris, and I ask him about this, right? Well, he explains why Kevin Day couldn't get that information because Gary Boris deleted it. He deleted it because the guys who landed on the Princeton came to him, told him to turn over his data and delete what was on the ship, right? And of course, they went and got the captain because he wasn't going to do that, unless his commanding officer told him to do it. And so they said, yes, do it. So he deleted everything, and the guys in the helicopter left with the original data. So there's no doubt in my mind that data exists somewhere.
Right.
And, until I investigated that specific case, I had never really believed there was some, government agency out there that was collecting UFO/UAP data. I just didn't believe it, right? But once that happened, that converted me. I said, okay, someone is out there gathering the data.
Yeah, I mean, you think of all the different things that we've heard over the years, anything from Gordon Cooper, filming that UFO, not him himself, but him handling the film afterwards, and a courier taking it to Washington, D.C. And then also at Big Sur, the filming of that missile launch where that object came around. All these things that have happened, they go somewhere, along with the radar data and along with probably a lot of films that we'll never see,
Yeah.
So I'm hoping maybe we'll get the answers.
And the other thing is, right, the gimbal data, right, that only happened in 2015. And the gimbal became public in 2017 during the New York Times, right? Late 2000. So it was only 2 years old. So no one can convince me that the radar data for the gimbal, the go fast, and there were actually 3 other videos that night. That's from a source that I could never reveal, but there were 5 videos taken that same day.
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that until I interviewed Ryan Graves recently, that they were the same day. I thought they were like spread out over years or something. The same day.
It all happened within a short period of time.
Yeah.
And the guy that told me this said one of these videos, there is an object coming directly at the F-18, and they think they're going to have a head-on collision, and right before it gets to him, it just zips off at a 90-degree angle and avoids impact. So he said, the guy that told me this said, that's the one that they'll never release.
Yeah.
And so that somebody, though, has that data. The other thing that happened that day, which is kind of funny, is the admiral who was over that strike group, he was contacting the guys on land, asking if they had somehow sent a jet into his area, right, or some type of vehicle, because the strike force, when they're doing these maneuvers, they control that whole area. No one else is supposed to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
So he contacts them, and someone starts making a joke about UFOs, right?
Yeah.
And that ticks off this admiral. So he goes, if you think this is funny, I'll file, these hazard reports for near air, mid-air collisions. And the Navy takes those very seriously. They go all the way to the top if those get filed. So he told them if they thought this was funny, well, we'll just file a bunch of these reports and you'll see how funny it is.
Well, when I last year I was at the Ozark UFO conference, which is great, by the way, for anyone looking for a very interesting, beautiful place to go to. Um, so I talked with Kevin Day. I've met him a number of times, but in the particular, I sat and interviewed him there during the conference, and I said that that someone I know that's actually a helicopter pilot and ex-military. He's absolutely, and he talks UFOs, but he is absolutely convinced that the Tic Tacs were our technology. And I told Kevin that, and Kevin got really, while I'm interviewing, got really angry, and he said, if that's so, I'm suing the government because they put people at risk. And he said there's no way they would never put something like that in the middle of a testing, situation.
No. If we had that capability, and this was in the year 2004, right? If we had a vehicle with that capability, we wouldn't be taking 9 months to get to Mars.
That's true.
We wouldn't be spending billions to do that.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And so I know this is completely off topic of what we talked about, but what do you, just to get opinions from, and I don't know if you've even looked into this, Dave, but I'll ask Robert first. What do you think about the crash retrievals things? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think it's, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people?
Yeah, I think that's somewhat of a tough pill for me to swallow also. But it's not really a question of science, right? This is a question of fact. You've got a guy, a whistleblower, who comes out and he says two things. I'm talking about David Grush here. He says that he's talked to people that convinces him that these programs exist. But number two, he says that he has seen the documents, right, that support that the programs exist. Well, at that point, it's up to Congress. Congress has to go investigate and get those documents. It's not a question for science, right? It's either true or it's not true, and that's up to Congress, to do that.
Yeah. And there's people that claim that these things are, reverse. We've reversed the technology, which would seem like it would be near impossible to me, but like people will oftentimes say that would be like a caveman, trying to figure out what a cell phone is, type of thing.
Oh, you don't even have to do a caveman, Martin. You could give this cell phone to the greatest scientists of the year 1850, and there's no way you could give them the schematics and everything. There's no way they could reverse engineer this cell phone, because for one thing, they don't have the technology to deposit the aluminum and copper that makes the submicron wiring, nor do they know how to do the transistors. And they have no idea that this thing has operating with something called an internet, right? I mean, there's just no way. I used to, in the semiconductor industry, I would reverse engineer Intel computer chips. That was one of my jobs. Well, it is extremely difficult to reverse engineer something when you know the science that they're built on, right?
Yeah.
There's no way when you don't even understand the science that it's developed upon.
That's all good points. It's kind of like the progression of how we invent things. We have, something comes before something else, and it builds upon and builds upon and builds upon.
It's all layered in science.
Yeah.
It's all layered on top of each other, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you can't just, it's not one little thing. It's thousands of pieces.
You just don't jump, basically,
that come together to develop.
And Dave, I don't know if you've looked into any of that and what your thoughts are on the crash retrieval.
Well, I typically just try to stay in my lane as far as analysis, as FLIR and stuff. I find it kind of interesting. Like they had that, I forget his name, but they had the guy with the egg that was in like
Jake Barber.
Yeah, thank you. So I thought that was an interesting story, and I'll check it out and I'll follow him and keep tabs on it until I can make a judgment one way or the other. But again, people like me or people that are in customs or in DHS or FBI or all these people coming out or in the Navy, I tend to kind of believe them because I understand the risk they take. that you don't do that just for a goof. You do that because something has fascinated your mind with an unexplained thing they have seen, and they want to, share that with the world. And I get it. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt first, and then kind of work my way from there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You make a really good point there, and that is, for just talking about the people who have testified, the 6 who have testified so far, and maybe earlier the other ones that have, but they're under oath, and they can perjure themselves. It's a pretty serious crime, and a lot of problems if they actually are caught doing that. So possible, I don't know what things would be taken, but
I mean, for me, Martin, the big question is, it seems like it's been a year and a half ago that Grush gave his testimony. What has Congress figured out so far?
I know. Yeah. Really hasn't got too far. And I don't know, according to Anna Paulina Luna that spoke earlier that we watched the clip on, there's a lot of stonewalling going on, and I wouldn't be surprised about that myself. But, maybe it will be good from this point out. Maybe there will be more transparency. We'd like to see that. A lot of people have said that this year, 2025, including Lou Elizondo, has said that it's, hold on to your seats. This is going to be a heck of a year. And, it's maybe shaping up to being that. It would be.
It already has been.
Yeah, already. Yeah. So we have a couple of more, let's see, a couple of more videos I'd like to show. One of them is, and this is one that you provided, Dave, and that is 5 things that we should know about. Is it the FLIR or what is it?
5 things you should know about the gimbal video, I believe you're referencing.
All right, yeah, let's I'm going to play that now. Here we go.
Here are 5 things that you should know about the gimbal UFO video.
All right,
Number 5. Okay. What kind of FLIRs are these?
That's the FLIR.
The infrared equipment used to record the 3 UFO FLIR videos were FLIRs, which stands for Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Systems, and they're usually mounted on fighter jets such as the FA-18. The infrared equipment that I work on has more of a surveillance application. There is a crossover between the two because of the similarities between the technologies, therefore I decided to go ahead and make an input. These systems are completely different from other handheld units or other thermographies, and I'll explain why. This FLIR system that I'm operating has 5 fields of view: wide, medium, narrow, super narrow, and ultra narrow. Unfortunately, the FLIR 1 has 1 field of view, wide. Number 4, couldn't it just be a smudge on the window? This is actually one of the first experiments that I tried, was taking an old window and putting it in front of an infrared and looking at a soldering iron with a smudge of grease on the window. And it turns out it's exactly what you'd think. It looks like a smudge of grease is on the window. It's pretty obvious. Number 3, infrared and visible light are both electromagnetic radiation. Isn't it all the same? Infrared and visible light might both be on the electromagnetic radiation wavelength scale, but what we're talking about is the equipment. The optics used for visible light are pretty much just what you see on a day-to-day basis, visible windows. You can see through them. The optics for infrared equipment is not anything like that. They're made out of metalloids, germanium, silicone, that kind of thing. So the difference between the visible light camera and the infrared camera, there's a lot of differences. It's completely ridiculous to hold a flashlight up to a window and rotate and say, see, look, there's where the glare rotates, and that's what it's all about, because it's just light and it's heat, and I don't know what I'm talking about. It's not that at all. It's heat versus light. There's a big distinction and differentiation that he doesn't understand. Number 2. There's this altered video that shows artifacts that move the same time as the gimbal rotation. What's up with that? Well, I originally had a thought that it might be the tracker, because when the object rotates, the tracker reacquires the image, and therefore the whole scene could adjust as the tracker is adjusting with it. That may or may not be right. I don't know, so I'm not going to stick to that. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what is going on with the rotation, whether it's the gimbal or the derotation device or the aircraft itself. It doesn't matter, because it all comes down to number one. And number one, is it glare rotating? Let's put aside the whole semantics of is it glare or flare or reflection or any of that. What we really want to know is does it maintain a heat signature, or is it some anomaly with the camera? I have maintained my stance that an infrared camera will not show a glaring or flaring of any sorts when it's looking at the back of an aircraft jet, like you would see with a daylight camera. That's ridiculous. I will say that there has been some glaring and flaring in the infrared when the sun's out in the morning or late afternoon and it catches the windows just right, the IR windows. Yes, there is glaring and flaring. However, if you change fields of view, you will see that the infrared just sees right through that. And when you're looking at something in a narrow field of view, it's not applicable. I think it all comes down to rotation. And what I mean by that is glare rotating, or is the thermal signature rotating? I would say the thermal signature is rotating, and obviously Mick is saying there's some kind of glare or IR camera anomaly going on. I will have to say this. Mick has a flashlight and a FLIR 1. I've been using FLIRs for the last 15 years and about 15 different models of them. You decide.
Thank you for that, Dave. That was great. Yeah. So you have a channel people can see all these videos on, and it's just under your name, right?
Yeah, shameless plug. Dave Falch, YouTube.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, all interesting. And so I don't know. I'm going to turn to comments for now to see if. Oh yes, and this person. This is just going back to the egg video. So Jake Barber, Wyatt is saying, that Jake did not supply the egg video, and he's not the only one. I've had probably 50 people tell me that. So I don't know exactly, what the who provided that, and it seemed like that it was his, during that show. So I don't know anything about that, but so I guess I want to say to both of you, as far as the videos that we see, the 3 videos, we're talking about the Go Fast, the Gimbal, and the Tic Tac. I can't think of, there was that one, of course, Aguadilla. There was that one off of the Omaha. You have anything to say about that, Dave?
Well, they all share well, not all of them, but it's not only just the Omaha. There's also La Bruja and Rubber Duck, and there's a bunch of them that we didn't really go over, but there's a lot of anomalies that you can't really explain with the FLIR camera, and I don't mind if it's an explainable thing, because I usually do that. I address the common view thing, like if it's a bird or it's a bunch of balloons. Yeah, it's great. But I try to dismiss those things before I really take a look at these things. I get a lot of videos that people are like, "What's this? What's that?" And I said, "It's a spider in front of your, your night vision on your house, or stuff like that." But these are ones that I've taken a look at, not once or twice, but I go over them again and again, and I analyze it. And I'm like, it sticks out. It's iconic. These are things that are not explainable, at least from my perspective.
Okay, well, let's talk about, you just mentioned the Rubber Duck one. And I heard, fairly quickly afterwards that someone thought that was an Islamic, celebration balloon. And but
you're thinking jellyfish.
Oh, the jellyfish. I'm sorry. I got the jellyfish and the rubber duck mixed up. Okay, so the jellyfish. And so what are your thoughts about the jellyfish one?
Yeah, same thing. I compared that, and there's videos on this on my YouTube, but I've compared that to balloons, which is the plausible explanation. But I took a bunch of mylar balloons and latex balloons. I put them together, and I showed the differences and what they look like to do my best at the scientific method. So I said it does not look like that. So my interpretation would be, unexplained. I'm not ever going to say it's, the Imperial droid coming down for, like Planet Hoth, and there's, tauntauns and stuff. It's not that. I don't know. I don't know what these things are, and I'm not going to say I know. I just know what they aren't.
Right, right. So I'll just pop up that one just for those people that are still hanging in with us that haven't seen that one. I'm sure. Oh, I don't know. That's Jeremy talking.
There's Jeremy.
I don't want to give him too much. No, never mind. Whatever. Yeah. Okay. So there's the so-called jellyfish. And so what someone did was, I don't know if you saw this in particular. I think it was, I'm trying to think, Theo in Brazil, I think it was, who kind of lined up an Islamic balloon. Now, whether that would be, the celebration would have been during that time, I don't know. I don't know anything about that in particular.
I know what you're referencing. That was actually on Mick West's Metabunk site that somebody did an AI search for that they compared that AI generated the balloons. That's not a typical gathering of balloons.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, it was all an AI attempt.
Oh,
Mick
no.
jumped on that and said, "Yep, that's probably what it is."
Oh my God.
It was. There's nothing, cohesive. That there's no established. It's just ridiculous.
Okay, here's the rubber duck. Now this was by Andy did release this one, right? Andy
Yes. Well, via his contact.
Right.
That was in like CBP or whatever.
And SCU did a report on this one. Peter Reale did a report on it.
All right. And what's the conclusions from this one?
That it was an unknown object that doesn't, match up with anything we could match it with. I mean, it's not a balloon. It's not any type of flying craft.
I'm not seeing it showing up yet here. Let me just move this video along.
It's a long video. It doesn't show up to like 50 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's like a 30-minute or so video. I mean, the problem with people that say it's a balloon, right? Because it's very white, and white is cold. So it's like this ice cold object moving along.
Right.
And if kind of like Dave has shown you, balloons reflect the cold of the sky, but they also reflect the warmth of the earth.
There it is, finally.
So if that was a balloon, there should be points in that video where you see a dark color at the bottom where it's reflecting the ground.
Right. Like just like what he was showing with the Mylar balloons.
Correct.
Earlier. Yeah. It was black on the bottom.
And to me, we just have no explanation for it.
No, that looks like a chunk of ice floating through the sky.
Yeah.
And does anyone know about the wind direction and could that have been a windborne situation?
I know they took that into account in the report, but I don't recall, the wind, if wind direction was an issue at all, because I believe it changes direction during part of the video, if I recall correctly.
Oh, it changes direction. I was unaware of that. So
but it's like a 30-minute video, and I don't think it's moving in a straight line the entire time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like how these get the nicknames. The rubber duck, and
it does look a little bit like jellyfish. A rubber ducky.
That's pretty funny. But and then we have the egg. Now we have the egg to add to the whole thing. So someone said a very cold seagull. That's what it is. I like how people have a sense of humor. But so anyway, this has been great. I don't know. Before we leave here, Dave, is there some other videos that you've looked at that you want to talk about quickly?
Well, I won't bore anybody, but my favorite would be La Bruja, because it's
Are
on
you-
a system that I know.
It's La
Yeah.
Bruja. I don't know how to spell that, but I'm going to try.
BRUJA.
Okay, I got it. I think I got it. I'm just going to see if there's any. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think isn't it, Dave, similar to the rubber ducky, except it's on the ground.
Right. And that's not it, but it's got a similar appearance to that. And there's been some correlation between objects. People have called that like the what's the guy that flies around? He puts the things on his arms and he's got the jetpack. I guess like the jetpack guy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They say, oh, it might be a jetpack guy, but La Bruja is again a cold thermal signature, much like the rubber duck. So it's just something I've seen that I can't explain. And these are systems that I work on all the time. So it's one of the more fascinating ones for me, just like the gimbal. So I kind
This
of
wouldn't be it right now, would it?
no, but it's got the similar shape, and that's what's weird about it.
Okay. I don't think you're going to be able to find it, but
Yeah, don't worry about it. It just that
yeah.
your crowd can look it up if they find it interesting.
Yeah, they could Google it and they'll find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not doing too well with that, but anyway, so it's been really a fantastic night. I want to thank you both for your time and your great work. I think you both have done great work, and I congratulate both of you for having an open mind and not getting caught up in what the skeptics are saying, and have an open mind and take a serious look, and a scientific. Both of you are science people, and
yeah, the thing, for some reason, I mean, we're skeptics, Martin. I mean, but debunkers is a little bit different. And the problem is a debunker apparently is not comfortable saying, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
They have to put a label on it some way. They've got to put a label on it.
It's a good point.
I made a clip, and Neil deGrasse Tyson said something like, I put two clips of his together, and one of them was saying that just like it's ridiculous, the UFO thing is absolutely ridiculous. And then the other clip is, or I think I played that clip after I played this one, was, if you don't know, then why pretend you know? Like that. And next thing you know, he's saying, like
Exactly.
he absolutely knows
Because
there's nothing to it.
I can guarantee you that guy has not studied the subject. He has not put in 100 hours of study on the subject of UFOs.
But he's the expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
or at least he thinks he is.
You see that a lot of times. UFO expert, just like Mick West, UFO expert. I mean, anyway, I guess we've been doing a little bit of bashing tonight, but it's been a heck of a lot of fun.
It's been fun.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks to both of you and everyone. Don't forget, we'll be back with Sarah Gam from the UAP Task Force. Be a great show next week too. Thanks so much, gents.
Take care.
Night,
Good
guys.
night. Good night.
Talk to you later.